In my experience, trust is forming reality.
Definitely. Definitely.
In my experience, trust is changing reality beyond what's rationally believed in
As possible.
as possible. Has like a huge potential of influencing actually.
Action!
Welcome to the Spirit of Yoga. We are Kirsten
And Devdas.
from the Akasha Yoga Academy. In today's podcast, we dive into the topic of trust. What is trust? Trust in what? In what, really? Trust in what? Do we trust or base our trust in science-based evidence? Do we base our trust in shared values, or do we trust in the repetitiveness of patterns such as day and night, summer, winter? Like, what makes our trust? Like, what do we put our trust on, and what is trust?
It's such a fun it's a really fun question, and I think the yogis have an extreme answer to this, which is that you don't put your trust in anything that's transient, like anything that's changing. Of course, for some people, I feel like that's a hard because maybe they don't yet have that much experience of the unchanging. But what's easy to recognize inside of everybody is that the transient is not reliable. Like, even inside your own personality. Like, if you look at your own personality and you think, okay, 10 years back, what testimony would you have given about life? And maybe you would have said, oh, I love this thing. I stand 100% behind it. 10 years from now, it may just be like, well, that's not even part of my life anymore.
Right.
So, like, the fundamental kind of essential thing that defined you as a human being may now be totally irrelevant for you. And that's kind of like the meaning of transient, right?
But at the same time, I'm just thinking of a very recent experience. Serena is in an age where I would like her to understand and live by giving a word means living up to your word.
Yeah.
So to basically empower the word by following it up with action and by basically committing to one's word. And for me, that's a really important value. Maybe it's coming from yoga, right?
Yeah,
from
definitely.
Truthfulness.
Definitely.
And I give value to words, and I believe in words. And just recently, I made the experience almost back to back, from one day to another, that kind of the word was just not what the action was that was followed by the word. So
in your case or in somebody else's case?
in somebody else's case. So I gave my trust, so to speak, into the word, because I have this ideal, and also at the moment, like this learning lesson with Serena, that it is possible to live a life in which the word is trustworthy, basically.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole different dimension of trust, right? It's like, even if you're rooted in the absolute, your word still needs to be solid. And in fact, one of my teachers used to say, and I think it's like interesting thing to contemplate, he basically says, more or less, everybody's completely untrustworthy until they're rooted in the truth. Like, if you are not rooted in your own heart, of course you say things that don't mean anything, and because you're in the kind of flux of the transitory, and in a way that's particularly oriented towards self-interest. So I'm doing something right now, oh, but tomorrow it turns out it's not in my best interest. Oh, guess what?
Right.
Like, that changed. Well, how did it change? Oh, it changed because it's not good for me anymore. It's like, that's a very weak position, actually, right? It's like, that's what we would call in yoga tossed around by samsara, right? It's like constantly changing, and not being able to really stand in your word or in your truth.
But at the same time, there is also something about trust being an empowering factor for manifestation in a way.
Definitely.
Also, like we
Definitely.
can empower, for example, our children by really giving our trust into an ability or into their word or into whatnot to actually empower that into manifestation.
Yeah, like, if that's true in you only, right? It's like, if you've understood the value of truth and you're reflecting that in your world, then others will also begin to reflect that. And maybe it's a little bit different also in some sense in the life of a child, because they're firmly rooted in their own originality, and they're firmly rooted in their own truth, and yet they're very much in fluctuation in terms of the development of their personality.
Right.
And so, they're not totally stable in the place that they're coming from, but that's not because they're not utterly, totally beautiful and original. It's
Yeah.
because they're learning what's stable and what's not.
Yeah, right.
And that's a kind of a different phenomenon, you could say.
Mm, mm.
I mean, I feel like, well, for you, what's been your experience in the relationship between trust and surrender? Do you feel like there's some correlation between those two, or are they separate?
Yeah, they are interrelated. Absolutely. Um, they're related in a way that trust is surrendering basically to the force that's outside of personality, that's outside of doing from an individualized standpoint. And my experience, trust that can really change even manifestation is not something that is generated the change from within basically, but more it is by surrendering to a bigger force, a bigger flow, um, where this manifestation is being invited from. So trust and surrender definitely go together in this very spiritual meaning of trust into the stable point, basically. Trust, or not point, but trust into the stable essence. And this is definitely coming together with surrender. Like, it is nothing individual, it is nothing that comes out of our personal experience or is generated by personal experience, but it is by surrendering and opening and aligning to that.
But also, it is in some level informed by experience, also, right? It's informed by your experience of the
Maybe confirmed.
confirmed, or like, I think that's the most interesting thing of one of the most interesting things about trust or faith. Like the kind of often the Western spiritual approach to trust is either it's there or it's not there, and not it's a capacity like any other capacity that actually can be developed. And my experience is that it is a capacity that can be developed, because the more that you kind of lean into it and the more you feel that it's guiding your life, the more you just take your hands off the reins. And it's just like, okay, like I have complete trust that the like amazing intelligence of life is just absolutely guiding my life. And then seemingly something really bad happens, but I don't just immediately say, oh, something bad happened. Like I stop and I say, okay, life, like, what's this all about? Like, maybe this is the biggest opportunity of my life. But if I just immediately say, this is wrong, this is bad, I don't want this, I miss out, actually. And I feel if you take that as the definition of faith or trust, as something that can be developed, there are profoundly, profoundly beautiful examples of trust in the spiritual realms. There are many, but one of my all-time favorites is Gandhi just gets shot, and as he's falling to the ground, he puts his hand up in blessing to the one that shot him. Your life must be completely given to the intelligence of life before you can fall to the ground having been shot and bless the one who shot you. It's like, that's not a overnight achievement, that's a lifetime achievement. And it's a lifetime of just total, complete trust in the profound wisdom and intelligence of life. Because you don't get that ending unless you've been practicing all along the route.
Right, but there is still something how trust, this capacity of, it's a capacity to trust, I would say, or is it, what is it? What is, it's a capacity, it's a human capacity to trust, basically, to, what does it mean to trust? Like to put all of your energy, belief into a certain place, right?
Into a
And
certain
place,
place.
like keeping it now very very open, and this settling all into one place has the ability or the potential to actually change this place, right? Like trust, in my experience, trust is transforming reality.
Definitely. Definitely.
And my experience, trust is changing reality beyond what's rationally believed in
As possible.
as possible. So trust has like a huge potential of influencing actually reality or creating reality or shaping reality or in a way of making space for a certain part of reality to emerge.
Yeah.
Like trust is something miraculously like
Very powerful.
trust is magical.
Definitely. Definitely. And you don't get it in the extremes unless you've had it in the less extremes.
Hmm.
Like the and that's maybe what's kind of like interesting to pick up on. Like the other day, or I shouldn't say the other day, in a previous podcast, we you and I talked about our relationship. You said we had some rocky moments, and in those rocky moments I forgot who you were, and that led, I forgot who your soul was. That led to some of the challenges. But those rocky moments also were some of the foundation of your faith. Not in me, but in the wisdom and intelligence of life. At least that's what it seems to me.
Yeah.
Is that also your experience?
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's definitely true that in those really confrontative, challenging, confrontative to the point of like losing sight of meaning, losing sight of purpose, almost losing sight of what it's all about, like moments in which life is completely shaken and put upside down. In a way, there's this possibility that the essence gets, of course, more seen.
Yeah.
There's less clutter, there's less comfort, there's less superficiality in a
Yeah.
way, there's less distraction. And this opens, I feel, the door way of seeing, more clearly seeing towards the essence.
Definitely, definitely. And that's why, as a yogi, you don't just constantly ask for the sugar flavored experiences.
Yeah.
You know, like I remember when I first went to India, my teacher was giving a talk at a mall. I was fresh in India. I knew nothing about India. And they asked me to do the sound. It was a fairly small event. And they were like, okay, we want you to be the person responsible for sound. I said, sure, I know all about sound. No problem. Great. I'm on. So the event was that afternoon. I ordered the taxi like an hour before it would have been necessary, hour and a half before it would have been necessary, because I thought, okay, it's India. You don't know what's going to happen. So it doesn't show up. But I'm still just completely relaxed because it doesn't matter. I've got an hour to spare. But he doesn't come until like exactly the hour, like the point at which it's already getting a bit question mark if things are going to work out time wise. So he takes me to the place where the event is, and then I'm telling him like, you were an hour late. Like I need you to help me with the equipment. Like, I know it's not your job, but I just need you to help me. Like, so he and I are running through the mall with this heavy equipment, going up to this like place where the talk is going to be. I get up to the talk. I get, plugging things in and putting things in, and then all of a sudden, just this incredible, ridiculous pain in my stomach. Insanely painful. And I just couldn't continue. I just basically went into the bathroom, and I was in so much pain, I was lying on the floor of the bathroom. This is just like totally wiped out. Then I remembered I have my phone, and there's somebody in the other room that has a phone also. So I call this guy, and I'm on the floor in pain, telling him, "Okay, plug the red thing into the red socket." I'm giving him instructions to how to set up the sound from the floor of the bathroom. And then just as suddenly as all that pain came, it left. It was just like I was completely doubled over in pain, and then all of a sudden the next minute I was fine.
Mm-hmm.
I stood up, I went outside, I like plugged everything in, I said something into the microphone, I went to my chair, everything was like seemingly set up. I exhaled and I sat down, and my teacher walked in the door, and I stood back up. It was like done within a second of the time that it was meant to be done in. And the event was fantastic. It was very beautiful. Then afterwards, I went to some of the people and I told them the story of what happened, and their opinion was, "Wow, that was so auspicious. What happened to you?" You're in the best, most auspicious place you could possibly be in, because negative forces will come when a soul that great is going to come and share something, and you helped bear the burden of that, and that's a blessing. And, at that point in my life, it was like, well, it didn't seem like a blessing. But, of course, they're right. It was a blessing. But that kind of trust and faith in life comes from experience. And it doesn't usually come from chocolate-flavored experience. It comes from letting your spirituality, letting your truth, letting your essence really confront something that's not easy. And then see, where are you centered?
No.
Where is your heart in that moment? Where is your trust in that moment? Is it still there? Is it not there? What are you trusting in? And in that way, it is something that has capacity to increase, but it doesn't increase necessarily through comfort. It increases through being given opportunities.
Trust is a force that is a catapult, I would almost say, into our greater dimension.
Yeah.
Like to take us out of limited personal small into something that's way beyond imagination, way beyond individual capacity, also way beyond the capacity of small, way beyond even mental possibility of small. Like, I feel trust is really the energy where miracles are rooted in. Like literally this spiritual miracles, healing miracles, um, I feel where they come from, what's behind that is the force of trust.
Yeah. And that's like, I mean, this is maybe a slight tangent, but that's where I feel like sometimes it can be helpful to have a chosen form of the divinity that you have a relationship to. Like, if you feel like, okay, I trust Jesus, or I trust the Buddha, or I trust, and those hard situation comes, and it's like, okay, let's talk.
Right.
Where are we at? Like, what's happening right now?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that can also be happening, like, with the more impersonal aspect of the divinity, which I feel like some people have. But sometimes I feel like with the impersonal aspect, it's harder. Like it's harder to feel the accountability.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the force that made 100 billion galaxies. It does also know about you,
Mm.
but it's easy to feel that it doesn't, because it's like your mind cannot even comprehend the small life that it's been given. Like, it definitely cannot even begin to comprehend a billion galaxies revolving on the tides of space, being created, destroyed. It's like it has no chance of even beginning to fathom that. Um, and then putting your faith and trust in that is like you're putting your faith and trust in something that you don't really know, because it's kind of, or if you can say you know it, it's because you have an intuitive sense of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You have an intuitive sense of that possibility. Um, but in that way, it can be really nice to have an actual relationship that you feel
Right.
like for you embodies that sense of trust and faith. Like definitely, unquestionably, I feel like my time in India was such a huge blessing in my life because of exactly what you said. It's like it took my idea of what possibility is and just threw it completely outside of the window, because it's just like, okay, there seems to be much more possible than I ever would have thought would have been possible. And so let me just take my definition of the possible and just rather get rid of it. Because there's just so much evidence that more is possible than I ever would have thought is possible, that I should just stop being the one who's policing what's possible and what's not
And
possible.
that's exactly the point of surrender, right? Like, this is exactly where we give up to live according to individualized, accumulated mental ideas from past experiences, and basically open up to realities that are much greater than that. I feel this is exactly where the point of surrender comes into the whole equation of trust, and this is where trust becomes powerful.
Yeah.
This is where, like, we initially talked about, what do we trust in? It's like scientific evidence, something that's trustworthy, um, or is it shared values, what we are trusting in, or is it repetitive patterns such as day and night, like after the night stops the day just comes, like, can I trust in that? And this is all, even though they're seemingly stable, day and night is something quite stable in a way. Shared values maybe less. Scientific evidence is also something quite changeable in a way, even though it seems so rock solid. in the moment, development, new perspectives, new parts to the equation that were unseen before, and a conclusion is just
And that depends on your span of, I feel like scientific discovery depends on your span of time. Like once I was sitting with my teacher in India and they were talking about the God particle, which by now I think is not news anymore, but at the time it was pretty hot news that this particle, the God particle, was there. And he said they think they might discover the God particle. If they discover it, they'll just lose it again in another 10,000 years. It's just like, okay, in the big span of time, it looks different.
Yeah, so this is one area of trust which is not a very powerful source to put our trust in, or like it's a very, maybe also a necessary survival trust in this after night there comes day, like what we
But
have.
even that I like, even that I feel like, you know, as a yogi, you trust only in your experience, actually. And your experience, okay, is night gonna come? Is day gonna come? At some point, it's not gonna come.
No.
That's fact. Like, that's absolutely more solid than the fact of is day or night gonna come tomorrow, is the fact that at one point it won't come. Like,
you mean now in the individual experience through death, or
yeah,
you
in the
mean
individual in the individual experience through death.
Yeah.
It's like, so, you know, you can say, okay, well, it's rock solid that the sun's going to rise tomorrow. It's like, well, for what period of time would that, like, in terms of your own individual experience, for what period of time would we be talking about?
Yeah.
Like, because in the foreseeable time, for sure there will be a point at which that's not true anymore.
Right.
And, you know, if you're using not outer circumstance of like the planet and the planet's function, but inner circumstance being your experience as the guidepost for that, it for sure will change.
Yeah.
You know, that's also from the experiential point, it's an extremely unreliable, right? It's inevitably unreliable. There will come a point in which it won't happen.
That's true. That's true. It's but in a very relative sense, like those type of truth or cornerstones, they are also in a way important. I'm just thinking of Serena, who had now repetitively, it's getting better right now, but having the fear that she doesn't want to go to sleep because she's not sure if there will be tomorrow morning and if we will be still all alive. Like that she thinks there will not be morning, or when morning comes, we are all dead. That's why she cannot go to sleep. She cannot go into surrender into the night, basically, because she's afraid not to come out of that anymore. And there is something.
What do you tell her?
I tell her that so far, after each night a day came, and my experience that happened so far every single day, and that I believe in that it will happen again. And what we do on top of that is praying.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So Serena is now asking every night that we can make a prayer to be protected, to be safe, and that we basically wake up again in the morning. We do exactly what you just said, basically. We are praying to Sri Devi, that's her chosen deity at the moment. We pray to Sri Devi for providing basically this ground of trustworthiness for our life to happen.
Beautiful.
But in a way, like what I want to say, this cornerstones of life, such as day and night, and working with that, such as summer and winter, the cyclical nature basically of life. There is something also about establishing a orientations in the very changeable part of life, and to work with those, um, and to trust in a way also into that.
But I wonder if that's true.
You don't think so?
Like from the experiential side, nobody's guaranteed any seasons. I mean, it doesn't mean that they don't exist and that you can't benefit from them or you can't use them or work within them.
But I feel for a life orientation, for myself, there is an importance to it. I just remember as I
Which means what exactly? Like, oh, you're going to tell
as
me.
I
Okay.
left Europe, like
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of seasons in Europe. Like
Yeah.
I love the autumn, I love the winter, I love the summer, the spring.
Yeah.
Like it was like a very strongly cherished and loved orientation since childhood. Like I was very connected to seasons. Removing myself from that, moving to Asia, um, it took me many, many, many years, 10 years plus, to actually start feeling the cycles again. And I found it very disorientating. Like I felt quite lost in time in a way. I find quite it it took away an orientation that was in a way very comforting for me. The cyclical nature of the year basically was something that I was relying on, what was comforting me, what gave in a certain way a trust
But
also.
isn't that like back to where we started in a certain sense? It's like you had that removed from you
Yeah.
to develop trust.
Yes, but what I'm seeing two different levels of trust. There's a trust into the cycles uh, that are happening on a very personal level that gives orientation and comfort in the very changeable life. This is one form of trust that is an orientation giver. Like we're not thinking every day like, is it summer? Is it winter? What should I prepare for now? Like, how do I get out of the house? Should I get my coat and my boots, or rather the sunglasses? I'm like this, like functionality. Like there is a trust in a way in this in the cycles, and it gives orientation and functionality for the very changeable part of life. um, this is one type of trust, like a functional trust in the changeable, or in the, let's just call it changeable part of life. And there is a trust that has the power to completely break out of that, is when we basically remove that um, that concept and that knowingness of the changeable aspect, to remove that completely, and through that basically being empowered to a clear seeing beyond that very changeable part of life. And that's the trust, the type of energy, or yeah, the type of energy maybe that actually changes manifestation, that changes experience completely. So what I'm saying is like there's two layers or two levels of trust. Like one is the trust in the familiarity of cycles, which is kind of important for the functionality and the orientation and the very um, in the small part of life or in the very personal part of life. And then there's the trust that completely removes all of that and allows for clear seeing and for actual deep transformation. And it's interesting to see that both is what we would call trust, but one is removing the other completely, um, and almost replacing possibilities, um, like being able to completely, yeah, change movie, completely change entirely what we have been trusting in that was there for orientation. And I feel this is also what's perhaps so unsettling is when this trust that usually gives orientation in life is shaken up. Like, remove yourself from your seasons, remove yourself from suddenly being in a war situation, suddenly being in like where like the cycles, this trust in morning, night, whatever, um, being shaken up. Like this is where I feel we start being existentially confronted.
Definitely. That existential confrontation from a yogic standpoint is an inevitability. It's not that you will not have that. You
Yeah.
will have it.
Yeah.
It's just a question of when will you have it.
And it's needed
Yeah,
to wake up. Like it's
exactly.
needed to
Exactly.
remove yourself from this identification,
Yeah.
identificational trust in a way, or uh,
The false sense of trust, like
yeah, yeah,
you know, that's like what in the yogic scriptures. I think there's this quote: "What's day to the worldly man is night to the yogi. What's night to the worldly man is day to the yogi." Which is just like you're seeing things completely the opposite of what
yeah,
a normal person would be seeing. And I think from a yogic perspective, you're seeing that existential kind of confrontation is inevitable.
hmm
So why postpone it? Like, why will I wait for it to come in the last moment of my life? Why would I not start to confront and look at those things right now so that I'm ready when that big confrontation comes? One of the great yogis of the modern world used to kind of make a joke. He said, "When your time comes, all your appointments will have to be canceled." It's just like you think your appointment tomorrow is so important.
yeah,
You have it written. You're sure that it's going to happen.
yeah.
It's like when that time comes, all those appointments will have to be canceled.
Right.
It's just, it's but what's interesting, and like I think the average person thinks like that's a morbid, that there's morbidity in that, or there's something that's like, but in fact it's the opposite. It's like
Mm-hmm.
when you've accepted your mortality, that's when you begin to live. Like that's when you begin to enjoy life.
Aliveness is enhanced.
It's just fully like, because all around us is a living, breathing miracle, but we don't see it or enjoy it because we're worried about losing our appointments.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
And maybe that's the ultimate trust, right? Is that there's an intelligence that knows even when when it's time for the appointments to be canceled. There's a
Yeah.
trust that knows even that. And that's, back to Gandhi and his, it's like, okay, just thank you
Right.
to life. It's my time. Um, blessings to the one that sent me into the next world, because everything has a season.
Mm. Yeah, and this is, I feel, also a really important trust to develop. This trust in the trust in the confrontation, the trust into the disaster, the trust into the seemingly negative, the trust into the challenge, that this is really where growth comes from.
Yeah.
Like that actually these moments of being highly uncomfortable and completely shaken up and pulled apart, and that this is where it's at,
Yeah.
kind of where a potential to transformation is inherent. And we're so busy oftentimes to make everything work and run in a seamless and comfortable way, in a way which is completely contra indicative to what we should set ourselves up for disaster, basically. For like, if we want to go fast, right, like we would look for the challenge every day and kind of hit our head
Yeah.
again and again. But
I-
that's usually not how we purposefully set ourselves up. But to
No.
develop then the trust into, I'm so sick, but you know what, that's good.
Yeah.
Like, this is not comfortable, this is completely crazy, but um, there is a point to it, and a
Yeah.
learning and a transformation,
Yeah.
and to trust basically into the goodness of the disaster.
Yeah. And there's no need to invite those things because they come by themselves, right? And that's in a weird way also the trust. It's like, okay,
Yeah, right.
if I really trust in life, I trust that it's bringing me everything that I need, all the vitamins, all the nutrition, all of everything that I need for my own spiritual growth must be provided to me at the right time.
Yeah.
And at some point it's abundantly clear that that is the situation. That everything that you require is just meticulously being provided for you at every moment along the way. And when I feel like when that realization comes, it's a bit like what we were talking about the billions of galaxies. It's like there's 8 billion people on this planet. That's just the human beings. That's not the animals, the plants, the everything else. Like, and each one is being meticulously cared for. And then you feel, wow, that must be one heck of a spreadsheet program. Like 8 billion, it's a really big number. At one point in his life, one of the great modern yogis went out into the desert. He was having problems with his organization, and he prayed to Divine Mother, maybe you could take the organization away from me. And he received an answer for that prayer. I run the entire universe. Can you not run one single? Can you not run one single point? He was a bit like, and then she said, dance of life, dance of death. Know that these come from me and rejoice. It's like the ultimate one-line description of life. Dance of life, dance of death. Know that these come from me and rejoice. Just thank you to the great intelligence, the power, the beauty, the miraculousness all around us, sustaining life. Maybe that's Serena's prayer to Sri Devi.
This was today Wisdom in Motion with the Akasha family. Keep on shining in the spirit of yoga.